Hello viewers, welcome back to Bait Al-Asad. This is Frank Perrin. Today's video is going to be a little bit different because for some reason my recording software has it so that my mouth is not syncing with my words. So I'm actually not going to be appearing on camera. But instead, while I'm talking, I was going to give you a nice little panorama here of some of the things that I have on my wall. But today's video is going to be talking about the origins and the common ancestry of the Persian Shamshir and the Ottoman Killij. This goes back a little bit to a video I had where I discussed how cultures tend to blend together, right? How the medieval Middle East, even dating back to the ancient period, was not just a homogeneous region, right? We can trace areas that have cultural origins, or we can trace items that have their origins to certain cultures, but it's not always that easy. And sometimes it is better to just understand that it's really difficult to tell where a definitive starting point is. And you see it happen a lot with certain swords, right? They'll say, no, that's a Turkish sword, or that's a Persian sword, or that's this sword. And it's really difficult to actually pinpoint where something began. Well, that's not always true. It can be difficult. But it's important when understanding weapons that are as iconic as the Persian Shamshir and the Turkish Killij that we do gain an understanding of its common ancestry. And first we have to know a little bit about some context for the region. All right, so in the 14th century, which is where I'm talking, and this is the starting point I'm making. In the 14th century, Turkish and Persian culture and identity were two of the most prominent in the area, right? Especially in the Timurid area section of the world, which is what I like to talk about. Here, you start to see a type of sword emerge in miniatures, and you find some archaeological depictions of it, right? And it starts to get a label. And what that sword looks like is this right here, which I hear it kind of incorrectly sometimes called, a Turco-Mongol saber, or I've even actually heard it called an early Killij. And I don't necessarily think that is true, but I also don't think it's false. So, swords like this, you do see start to appear in the mid-14th century. They have these square pommel caps, you have these diamond cross-section cross guards, and you have a blade that begins have a very pronounced curve with a Yalman down at the end of it, which is why I believe that it gets attributed the Turkish and why it keeps getting called a Turkish sword. However, there are archaeological finds in Western Iran that match very similar profiles with the crossguard, and their blades just don't have a Yalman. But there are 14th century Ottoman finds that look very similar. So this sword was being used in both the greater Anatolia as well as greater Iran. So to just immediately call it an early Killij isn't really correct, because linguistically both names or both words just mean sword in their respective language. Shamshir just means sword in Persian, and Killij just means sword in Turkish. So, is this a Killij? If you're referring to it from the Turkish perspective, yes. Is it a Shamshir? If you're referring to it from the Persian perspective, also yes. It shows up in the same area in relatively the same form, so it's kind of a waste of time to fight over who originated it and where it came from first. And I like to think about it more so as a Turko Persian saber. And this is the sword that then creates the offshoots of the classical Shamshir and Killij as we know it. So on the left here is a classical Iranian Shamshir, the one most people have come to love and recognize. And these swords start to get the peak of their form in this version in the 16th and 17th century, when they get very extreme curvatures. But this version here, has the hooked pommel with the round pommel cap and that same diamond profiled cross guard, except when you go down, right, it has more of a taper down to the bottom, which leads me to believe, and as we've seen with some of the techniques demoed here, as well as on other channels like Razmasfar, that the Shamshir, in the Persian sense, is very, very effective and oriented to the thrust. So you can kind of see that this Turko-Persian saber would branch off into the Iranian world and create this sword over time, as you can see some of the similarities, in the hilt at least, with these two swords. Now, I don't have an actual steel Killij, but I have my synthetic trainer here, and I'm probably going to go ahead and just put a put an example of a period one that I've handled at the Worcester Art Museum up on the screen. And as you see there, right, the Killij didn't really keep the pommel. I mean, some of them did, right? But a lot of them in its classical Killij form have that wood knobbed handle. It has its own rough diamond fronted crossguard, and it has more of a pronounced hook curve, especially when you get into the palas, the shorter versions of these weapons. And the Killij did maintain the Yalman that you see in its earlier versions. So if we take a zoom back, we can see where the center sword really made its way to influence both of these swords in their respective regions, with the Shamshir maintaining the pommel but developing more of a tapered blade, with the Killij taking on its own form in the hilt with an extreme curvature, and the Yalman for much weightier cuts that help you make your cuts way more effective and help you put much more weight into your strikes. So I'm going to go ahead at the end of this video, and I'm going to leave some of the other sources that show you where this pops up in the Persian world, because a lot of people don't really believe that that's a thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just put that at the end of the video. And since I couldn't be on camera, I couldn't really do this the way that I normally do, but if you want these exact sources, feel free to email me below. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and the overall takeaway of this is, let's just stop kind of bickering over which area of the world has a weapon that belongs to it, and realize that the Middle Eastern world in the time of the Middle Ages was a rich, diverse tapestry of different cultures and societies and ethnic backgrounds that all really made it the beautiful place that it was. So this has been Frank Perrin for Bye to Al-Asad, and we will see you very, very soon. Thank you.